Surobourus. How on earth does that in English say Surobourus? Surobourus. Hi, minasan, konnichiwa, and welcome to the Board Game Dojo's Import or Not series, where we cover games from East Asia and let you know if they're worth your hard-earned money to import or not. This week has officially become Taiki Shinzawa week here at the Board Game Dojo. With the recent fulfillment of American Bookshop and Cinderella's Dance, we thought it might be a good opportunity to explore the designer a bit more. He has a bit of a cult following, mostly because both his games always have an interesting take that you have never quite seen before on tried and true mechanisms like auctions or trick taking, but also because his games can just be so difficult, near impossible to find. And in fact, even though I have quite a few of his games here, today's video review game, Surobourus, his take on an auction game, I can't even find a copy, so I'm going to be doing the teaching video later at a game cafe. Yes, you heard that right. There's going to be a teaching part of this video because like last week's video where we covered Tiger and Dragon by Oink Games, which you can find up here, there is absolutely no English to be seen in this game. So I want to break it down for you so you know how to play. So I'll put the thumbnails or chapters down below so that you can kind of skip around. The next part of this video will be me explaining the game, teaching the game, and then at the end we'll be doing our review, going over the pros and cons, and if it's worth the import or not. So feel free to skip around to the parts that most interest you. Now this video was actually pushed up a couple weeks because of interest in learning about this game from people on Discord. So I want to just invite you again to please comment down below, contact us on Twitter or Instagram. If there is anything that you want to learn about, we would love to cover it for you. So without further ado, I am going to head to the Board Game Cafe to teach you about the game. I'll be back shortly. Itakimasu!
Hello and welcome to Jelly Cafe, where today I'll be teaching you Surobourus, an auction game for 3 to 4 players that takes about 45 minutes to an hour to play. Upon opening the box, you'll be greeted with relatively few components that come in this game, including player bags for each player, chips that'll count as bid counters, and a deck of cards that'll make up the bulk of the game. To set up, first take out the game end card, shuffle the cards, and deal out 3 cards to each player face down. Each player will then select 2 cards to start as their starting tableau and 1 card to start in their hand. Next, make sure that each player has 22 chips in their bag. Like in Colorado, the game end card will be put in a specific place in the deck each game. Count out 4 cards from the deck, then put the game end card on top of it, and then put the rest of the deck on top. This is going to be the deck for the rest of the game. Rock, paper, scissors to determine the start player, and the game can begin. The game itself is actually quite simple. On your turn, you'll start your turn by drawing 1 card from the top of the deck. You'll then choose one of the 2 cards in your hand now to be put up to market. Place that card in the middle of the table so that everybody can see the card clearly. When we played, we always tried to keep the bank of chips close. The chips in this game are worth 10 each, so bids will be in increments of 10. Auctions are pretty standard, with players being able to either raise or pass. Once they pass, they cannot come back in. If the auctioneer wins the auction, they pay the bank, and if another player wins, they then pay the auctioneer. Once that is completed, it goes to the next person. So far, so auction, but the cards in this game are what make it interesting. You see, on each of these cards, there are spots on the card in which perfectly fit one of your chips. And by bidding, you will be adding these chips to the cards to try to complete them. So let me give you an example of what I mean. If I am bidding for the card in the middle, if I bid 10 for it, then I get to put a 10 from my bag onto the spot in the card. If I had a 10 on my other card, I would get to put 1 on that card as well. It's important to point out at this moment that you don't have to put a chip on the card if you choose not to, and I'll tell you why that's important later. But now look at the card in the middle, because these also make a difference. If anyone bids one of the values on the card in the middle, then the auctioneer gets to put a chip from the bank onto the designated value on the card in the middle as well. So this is a great way to try to bid to get the card to fill up. Now, why do you want these cards to fill up? Because the moment that the card fills up, you get to take the money off the card and put it back into your bag and then turn it sideways and immediately gain the power that is on that card. you'll get the points at the end of the game. Now, this is important because you cannot save these powers for later, so timing is important as to when you want to finish the cards. Once the game end card is drawn, count up all of the cards that have been completed and turn over any cards that have not been completed. Those will not count as points, but there also won't be a penalty. Then gather all the cards that have stars on them and count up how many stars you have in your tableau of the finished cards. This is really important and one of the most delectable rules that come in at the end of the game. The one who has the most stars gets bonus, but if you have 0, you are eliminated from the game. After any eliminations, the player left standing with the most points from the money left, bonus points from stars and special effect cards, and just general points wins. If you have any further questions, I would consult Zidaliv's excellent English translation on BGG.
Tadaima. This game is simultaneously fascinating and yet infuriating. It is a game I want to recommend, but just can't. Let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way. It is really cool to have a difficult to find game, and Taiki Shinzawa owes it to absolutely nobody to mass produce this game so that everybody can experience it. Usually I want to save the logistics towards the end of the video, the price point, where you can get it, things like that. I want to save that for the end of the video. I want to tell you all about the game so that you know about the game, and then you can come back and decide if the price, if it sounds interesting enough to warrant the price. But this game is an auction game, and so what's more fitting than trying to place a value on it from the get-go. This game MSRPs for something in the range, depending on the shop, somewhere between $35 and $40, which is already kind of high for a game that is essentially a bunch of cards and some chips. But hey, support the designers. I never mind paying a little bit more to support a person going after their dreams and publishing their own games. Great. I would be over the moon to find a copy for that cheap, because now this game is next to impossible to get for less than around $70, $80. And that means that with import fees, if you can find this somewhere, which is usually going to be in the resale, so we're not even talking like a new game for $70, we're talking a used copy of the game for something like $70, $80, which means that for a used copy of the game, you're probably talking about something like $100. And that is a different question of if it's worth the import or not right away, because you automatically have to think about something different. Auction games are a tried and true mechanic of board gaming. From Monopoly to Modern Art to For Sale, there are tons of auction games spanning the spectrum of price and complexity. And so going up against these classics of board gaming with an auction mechanism, it's hard for me to not take the angle of saying, okay, what does this game give that I can't get from something else that is more accessible to me, more available to me, it's in my language, and I can get it for a fourth of the price. So that's where I kind of want to start this off. So take everything that I say in the review with the perspective of I could not get that out of my head. So let's go over more specifics about the game itself. All right, let's get the price out of the way. Let's talk about the game. The game is interesting. The game is really, really interesting. Every time that I play it, I'm always kind of thinking about what I could have done a little bit differently for the next one. One of the reasons I think is because it turns auction strategies on its head. Usually when you're playing an auction game, you want to figure out how to make other people bid the least amount, right? In something like a Modern Art, you would much prefer people not bid a lot on the ones that you want and bid a lot on the cards that you're selling so that you can get money, right? But in this game, you want other people to be participating in the auctions, because the more they participate in maybe the auctions that you're going for, the possibility is, and it will definitely happen in a few of your games, where you'll get the card from the middle, you'll then take it, and it'll already be completed because everybody wanted that card, so then you get that money and you can put it back. So now you have money and the scoring mechanism that card gave you, the special effect that card gave you, which is such a cool feeling. It feels like you one-upped everybody. So that right away is something interesting, it's something different. There's also the idea that at some point, you always have people in auction games, I feel, who try to win the game not by buying, not by participating in the auction itself, but by accruing a ton of money. They'll sell the card themselves, they'll take that money that people gave them and keep it, and then they won't really buy a whole lot. And they'll win the game because a lot of auction games, you win by having the most money at the end of the game. And so that works. That's definitely something you have to always think about in a game like For Sale, where, okay, is the card that I'm trying to buy so that I can use it later to sell, is it worth enough for me to up my bid, or is it worth more for me to keep that money? It's a great mechanic in that game, but it won't work in this one because at the end of the game, we're so little in terms of points that it is so much better for you to use those coins for cards. And because of that, it means that everybody is always participating in the auctions, which means that you're getting these cards faster. They're going through faster. They're getting completed faster. And you're seeing everything, which means that unlike a lot of other auction games, the tempo is almost something that can be controlled. I talked about in the rules thing where timing is really important, in which what time is good for me to complete this card so that I get its bonus. How can I max out that timing? Well, another thing about the timing is how fast is everybody going through their cards? Because if you're just flying through the game, then you're not going to have as much time before that game end card goes. I've had games of this last somewhere in the 40 to 50 minute range because people were planning out, they were thinking about it, they were slowly building up their cards. And even though you're drawing one and then playing on every game, there are cards in which you, okay, draw the top card and then you automatically complete it. There's cards like that. So we have the tempo layer of the cake, and then on top of that, we have another strategy in which you try to eliminate somebody by making sure that they don't get the stars. In fact, the first 2 games that we played of this, I would have crushed people in points, and people knew it. So towards the end of the game, every time that a star came out, they would raise it to these crazy high bids that I couldn't afford because their strategy turned into keep the stars away from Eric, because then Eric can't win the game. So it's almost as if it's a rubber banding mechanism, but in a way that you don't want to be so far ahead that the other people can do that. Or if you're going to pull that far ahead and people know about it because all of the points are open information, you want to make sure that you have enough money left to be able to afford at least one card that has a star so that at the end of the game you can actually get points. It's a very clever mechanism and one I think works really well here. Auction games are often really easy for me to convince people to play with me, more so than trick takers, and I think part of it is because people are just more familiar with how auctions work in general, but also because of the thematic tie-ins that often go with it. It's easy for me to convince somebody to say, hey, we're going to play a game in which we're going to sell each other some art, and we're going to bang on the gavel a bunch of times, and it's going to be a funny time. There's High Society, a no pun included favorite, which is an auction card game. You are all rich people trying to gain status, but if you spend more than everybody else, if you're the poorest at the end of the game, then you're eliminated because you're no longer a rich person. That makes thematic sense. This game, you read in the manual, is supposed to be about buying and selling IPs. I guess? But what are they? I don't know. The yellow IP? The purple IP? The cards that you're supposed to acquire, and this you would think would be a great opportunity to have some kind of valuable IP if we're going to keep on that theme, some kind of cornerstone technology or something, right? You want to have this because if you don't have this, nobody's going to invest in you, and so if you don't have any of this, you fail as a company. There are thematic ties in for that, you would think, but it's just a clip art star in the middle of a card that are, again, kind of hard to see. I definitely missed some of the star cards because I couldn't see them. It's just nothing. There is nothing there. There's no interest to it. I didn't even know what the theme of this game was until I had to look it up for the review. Now, I'm not going to say that that's going to be a turnoff for everyone. I think there's some people, like if you care more about the mechanics than the theme, hey, I don't think anything that I just said is going to turn you off of anything. But it is a big deal to us. It is a big deal to me as the only sensei here that played the game before, I am taking sole responsibility for this review. It means that probably 99 out of 100 times, we'll be a little bit, maybe 90 out of 100 times, I'm going to choose a different auction game than this one. If I want a portable auction game, I have For Sale and I have Boink's Modern Art. If I want a lavish production, I've got the Dice Tree version of Modern Art. If I want to be more complex, I'm going to play something like Tulip Bubble because it's kind of fun recreating the Dutch tulip crisis. And this actually goes into what I think this game needs. There are so many clever bits to this game in which I want to praise it, I want to recommend it, but then I have to remember how much it costs to have that experience. Because the lack of theme, the tininess of the cards, you understand what you need to do, but not why you need to do it. Because of the randomness of the cards, there's almost no way you can strategize for the future. And now we kind of come to the end of the review where I can see the skeleton of a good game. This game drank a lot of milk. It's got healthy bones. It's got the bones to hold up this game. And that's kind of the end of the analogy. I have no idea where I was even going with this. You will have a pleasant time. If somebody asks me to play this game, I'm going to probably almost always say yes. But at the same time, I don't think I'm ever going to suggest it. And so I sit here to you going, I don't really suggest it to you. If this game was around $30, $40 to play, then sure, go for it. Because you might get $30, $40 of fun out of this. Is it going to be your favorite auction game? I don't think so. It's just a game you're going to go, okay, that was pretty clever. I'm okay with not playing that again. It goes back to that fascinating but infuriating. I want to recommend it, but I can't because there are clever bits to this game, and yet I want to see something more from this. This game is just begging for somebody like Portland Game Collective or somebody like Board Game Tables to acquire the rights to this thing. First of all, making it more accessible in terms of being available and being at a decent price, but also just slapping on I would say a new theme, but just a theme would be nice. And then just developing it a little bit more to add something to it, to add to the good bones that are this game and giving me a reason why. And maybe you do that by theme. I don't know. I'm not a designer myself. But it comes back to how much this game costs. Because it is a value proposition. Is this game novel enough? Is this game interesting, unique enough to warrant $80 to $100? It's clever, but no. Is this game clean enough? Is it fun enough to be worth $80 to $100? Also, no. This sounds more critical of a game that I would probably give somewhere like a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10. But it's because I want this game to be a 9 out of 10. I want this game to be something that I can recommend to people. But there are just so many good auction games out there. For the price of this game, you could buy the CMON version of Modern Art, the beautiful Osprey version of High Society, the retail version of Raw, and depending on what stores you buy to and if there are any sales, you could also possibly have money left over for wine or For Sale. It's just hard to recommend a game where I also think those games that are quite a bit cheaper are also the better games anyway. But I guess that's the point of this channel, right? Is to understand that sometimes there are interesting games that maybe aren't worth importing. And so I hope that this video, other than being maybe self-therapy for me, was helpful for you too. So to sum up however many minutes I've been talking after edits, sorry about that, I'm just probably like rambling crazy. It's clever, I can see it. I see the promise that this game has. The fact that you want other people to be bidding on cards that you're also bidding on so that it actually benefits you because you can complete that faster. The fact that you have to think about when you want to complete that card. Those are interesting bits. Well, I've been saying clever a lot during this review. I never said fun because it's not fun. Maybe I'm just jaded because the games I play for auction are something like a For Sale, Modern Art. These are classics of the auction genre. Even something like Tulip Bubble had such great thematic tie-ins that my group, after we played it, we went on like a research binge about the tulip craze. About the actual Tulip Bubble. That's what I want from this. And I don't get that. But at the end of the day, it's never going to be a game that I pull off the shelf when I have other options. And when those other options are a quarter of the price, there's just no way that I can recommend this. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. I know it's not the most fun to watch a review where the conclusion is to not buy the game, but he's got some really good stuff too, and we're going to put the top 5 into podcast form. So you can play that on your podcast player, or we'll post a video on YouTube if you prefer to just listen to it on YouTube instead. Also, check out some of our other stuff. We're getting back into the swing of things, so we've got some more videos that you can check out over here, and a lot of them are more positive. So yeah.